If you haven't caught the new Halston miniseries on Netflix, I highly recommend it, especially since episode 3 out of the 5 episodes deals mostly with the launch of his first fragrance, Halston, in 1974. So I recommend that particular miniseries not only to learn the life of Halston, one of America's premier fashion designers, but that whole episode 3 was about the launch of that fragrance, which is very educational on what, people and brands go through to create fragrances. So because of that miniseries, I decided to buy several Halston fragrances so I can see how they are currently and what they smell like. Of course, I have my own bottle since the early 2010s, Halston Z-14. Really enjoyed this stuff. And actually Halston 112 was also another fragrance I enjoyed from a family. My dad and my uncle wore both of these. I've actually just worn this one, Z-14. But I bought a bunch of others. I bought 3 women's fragrances, including the original Halston. And then I bought 112 and Halston Man Amber from the men's collection. So there's a total of 6 fragrances here from Halston, and I'm going to let you know what these smell like currently. Also do a little bit update on what I remember them smelling like when I was young, when I remembered my dad and uncle wearing the men's and my mom wearing the original right here. Anyway, find out about Halston fragrances and a little bit more about the Halston miniseries coming right up. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian with Smelling Great Fragrance Reviews. Yes, today it's all about Halston fragrances, a brand I actually was very familiar with when I was a little kid, even before teenage, achieving teenage years. I remember my mom used to wear the original Halston, and both my dad and uncle wore Halston Z-14 and Halston 112. So how do these fragrances smell like? I'm going to let you know what they smell like, but also I picked up Halston Man Amber, which I had never sampled ever before, launched in 2010. Halston Woman Amber, also I picked up, that I had never sampled before, launched in 2010. And then I picked up also Halston Woman Silver, this one right here. I don't have Halston Man Silver, I couldn't find it. But this launched in 2009. And I'm going to let you know all about them, what they smell like. I think I might have missed a boat with Halston Man Amber and Woman and Silver, because those 3 smell fantastic to this day. The other 3 are really watered down, fragrances. But I'll let you know all about them. Before I do, if this is your first time tuning into the channel and you still haven't subscribed, please do click the subscribe button below and also click the bell so that you'll be notified for future videos and giveaways. So how many of you are familiar with Halston and the House of Halston fragrances? How many of you have worn Halston fragrances in the past? Let me know what you've worn. I'd like to find out if you're familiar with this house. Sadly, they're not releasing fragrances anymore. Last time they launched fragrances were the Ambers. Halston Man Amber, Halston Woman Amber came out in 2010, and that was like 11 years ago. I missed the boat on those 2 launches, although I think I had seen them in stores, but they came and went so fast that I totally missed them. The original Halston for women that launched in 1974 or 75 was created by Bernard Chant. Now, as I said, this particular fragrance and the launch of this fragrance is all documented in episode 3 of the Halston miniseries. I recommend it. But the perfumer they're using in that miniseries is not Bernard Chant or someone that looks like Bernard Chant. It's a woman perfumer. So I'm not sure why they changed the story in that particular miniseries, but still the whole entire episode involves creating the first fragrance, and I think it's very educational to see what they went through to create it. But this is the first fragrance from Halston, 1974 or 1975. I couldn't figure out the exact year, and I forgot what it was in the mini-series, but that's when it launched. Bernard Chant created this one, and I've spoken about Bernard Chant on the channel before. He's created a ton of fragrances for Clinique and also Estee Lauder and also Aramis. So he's very well known in the 70s and I think in the late 60s as well. I'm not sure if he did anything in the 80s, but he's created some amazing fragrances. Clinique Aromatic's Elixir. He's created Aramis 900, which both of those fragrances do smell like one another, and countless many others. And of course, he's created this one as well. And this is actually a cheaper fragrance. And even though I read that this particular fragrance, it's lost its qualities and it doesn't smell like what it used to, and I agree, it doesn't, because I remember this being a big bomb when my mom wore it in the very late 70s, early 80s. But it's not, I mean, it doesn't smell bad, that's the thing, because I do have a fragrance here that doesn't smell great. This one actually smells great, and if you're looking for a very inexpensive, cheaper style, classic 70s, 60s, 80s kind of perfumery, I recommend you try this one. I bought a tester from FragranceNet for about $12, $13. It came with a cap. It was in bubble wrap, but I think it still smells decent. It's not like a wow fragrance, but it kind of, you know, to remember those fragrances of the 80s, 70s, and 90s and things like that, definitely worth having in a collection for about $12, $13. So the notes here are Oakmoss, Amber, Carnation, Vetiver, Incense, Patchouli, Sandalwood, Orris, Jasmine, Cedar, Peach, Melon. So overall, it's an aromatic, woody experience with lots of earthy touches. Of course, as I said, it's a cheaper fragrance. Whenever you see Oakmoss in the notes, you do get that earthy touch, and of course, mossy touch as well, but it's very, very balsamic and ambery. Definitely experienced those touches in contrast with the woody, earthy, aromatic touches as well. Very, very classic. I love the way it smells. It doesn't smell bad. It has some oomph, but it's not like what it used to be. I think they've stripped away some of the good qualities of the fragrance. Whenever I see a really like overly reformulated fragrance, I feel like calling them diet, because they've kind of stripped away all the nutrients and the good stuff about it. So we're left with a kind of a good diet version of Halston, the original for women from 1974-75. Let me know if you've tested the latest Halston, the first fragrance from Halston. Let me know if you've worn it in the past. Let me know which versions, because I know it's gone through so many different parent companies and I can't keep track, but I think I read that this is under Revlon currently. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not into the details of who owns the brands now, but from what I remember, I think it was under Revlon. Either way, Halston, the original. Find out more about it by watching that miniseries on Netflix. And of course, as I said, it's so inexpensive, about $13 for that as a tester. I think it's definitely worth it to have, just if you like the, you know, the nostalgia around classic fragrances. But I'm also sure that there's probably vintages out there you can find, but it's a little risky with vintages, at least to me it is. The next fragrance I'm going to talk to you about is Z-14, Halston Z-14, the first men's fragrance. Now, in the mini-series, you do also experience the launch of his men's fragrances, and he launched them at the same time. No one's ever really done launching big fragrances at once, but apparently Halston did it. And as I said, both of these were worn by my dad and my mom's brother, my uncle, and both of them are really, really great fragrances. I bought my Z-14 in the latter 2000s or early 2010. There is some quality here. I do experience this particular fragrance being a lot more beefier than this as a much more recent purchase. It's really, really watered down, really watered down. And the notes at least jump out at me in here. They don't hear too much when I'm smelling it out of the bottle. So it's very, very light. And these are both colognes. It says cologne, so I'm assuming they're eau de colognes, concentration-wise. So this is created by Vincent, Marcello, and Max Gavarry. And when I first had my first channel, I did do a comparison of this with a fragrance from Tom Ford called Italian Cypress, and that was a really, really modern take on what this smelled like when it was first launched in the late 70s, being used, you know, in the early 80s when my dad and uncle were wearing it. So that fragrance sadly is discontinued. I wish I had some Italian Cypress. It was fantastic. And when I say Italian Cypress, it focuses on cypress, and this fragrance has loads of cypress. But it's a woody, aromatic, spicy fragrance with leathery touches. Notes features leather, cinnamon, cypress, oak moss, lemons, patchouli, coriander, benzoin, amber, bergamot, basil. Great stuff. This was a great fragrance at one point. I loved its potency. You'd spray one and you could smell the fragrance on you for the whole day, and it was a cologne. I mean, it was called cologne. It wasn't called, you know, fragrance or eau de toilette or, you know, eau de parfum or anything like that. It just said cologne on it, and it still says cologne. But the potency at one time was over the roof. But now it's very, very light. But as I said, this still smells like what it used to smell like, just a lighter version of it. This, on the other hand, is a brand new bottle, and it smells very, very light. And those of you that have Italian Cypress from Tom Ford, have you compared it to Z-14? I always felt like it smelled similar. Of course, the Tom Ford's Italian Cypress, being a more modern release, smelled a lot better than what this current version was back when I had first started speaking about fragrances. But still, for nostalgia reasons, I think it's a great fragrance to have. It's not very expensive. You can get this for like around $10 at Marshall's or TJ Maxx, places like that. I bought this one, as I said, in the early 2010s or late 2000s. This one from Fragrance Net, it was about $12, $13 for it. So these are also larger sizes. They're not 100 ml. They're, I think, 4.2 ounce, so 125 milliliter, I believe. But I think I still like this one. I love the way it smells. I wish I could find something that was very, very similar to this so I can wear it, because I just love the way it smells, and it brings back great, great memories, because I was only 9 years old when I saw my dad and uncle wear both of these fragrances. Anyway, Z-14 from the house of Halston. Let me know if you're a fan of it. Now, on the other hand, Halston 112 is just reformulated, butchered to death. I can hardly smell anything out of the bottle, and when I spray it on, it's very light, and it also doesn't smell as good as it once did. Now, in comparison, this was a lot more beefier as a fragrance than this. This is more of an aromatic green spicy. This is more of a woody aromatic leather. So most likely this would be your morning fragrance, this would be your night fragrance, because they did have similarities, but they were reversed, if that makes sense. So you would get away with wearing this during the day and at night here. But this just has become just very, very diluted, like a light rendition of the original. But when I first smelled it, it was so aromatic, spicy, green, just like a forest, like a pine forest walk through when it's all green and lush and aromatic and, you know, herbal smelling and green smelling in there. I did not find a perfumer's name for this one, but the notes are Oakmoss, pine needles, lavender, juniper berries, green notes, lemons, galbanum, carnation, labdanum, cedar. So as you can see, lots of green, bitter, herbal notes, woodsy notes, aromatic notes, and green notes, of course. So it used to be great. It's just not really great right now, sadly. But I think to have, for nostalgia reasons, I think it's great. And as I said, in that mini-series, there is a little section about Halston launching both of these fragrances at the same time. So they launched at the same time. And the perfumer for this was not the same as this. But they don't mention who the perfumer is for this one anywhere. And they didn't really get deeply into the launch of these two fragrances in that miniseries like they did with the original Halston fragrance. Anyway, for men's fragrances, I think for nostalgia reasons, these are great to have. Now, on the other hand, way fast forward to 2009, because the last fragrance I just spoke to you about were from 1976. We're going to 2009 with Halston Women Silver. And those of you that know Halston Man Silver, what do you think about that fragrance? I wasn't able to find a bottle. I'll still keep looking. Let me know if you have it and you like it. But Halston Women Silver is created by Carlos Benayem, a very, very well-known perfumer. And he did a great job here. I think it's a pretty solid release for a woman. I quite like the way it smells. It's also very, very beefy. It smells, you know, modern. It doesn't smell very, very classic. And it has some substance to it. It has some depth to it. But notes here are amber, patchouli, sandalwood, tagettes, blackcurrant, jasmine, orris, bergamot, and rose. So in the end, it's very woody and aromatic. You do have some ambery touches under there. You also have powdery touches here, but it's very, very warm and spicy, lightly floral. That's all I have to say about this one, but I'm happy with the quality. It's also great nostalgic for me to have these bottles. They're really, really cool looking bottles to have, as you can see. They're one-of-a-kind designs for fragrances, I think, as far as bottles go. And the mini-series, going back to it, does really dig into the way they decided to create the bottles and all that. So I think it's a very detailed episode number 3, going really deep into the launch of the perfumes and things like that. That's why I wanted to do this video, not only to recommend that not documentary but miniseries, active miniseries, and also for folks that might be into classic fragrances and older fragrances might dig into the Halston library of fragrances. I wish I found a larger bottle of this one. Sadly, I didn't. I'll look around a little bit more, and I wish I was able to find Halston Man Silver as well. I'm going to keep digging, but this is definitely a solid release. It's a small 1 ounce bottle. I'll cherish it for a while. So the next 2 fragrances were the last 2 fragrances ever launched for the brand of Halston, launched in 2010, 11 years ago, and it's Halston Man Amber, Halston Woman Amber. We're going to talk about Halston Man Amber. Both of the fragrances I could not find a perfumer for, whereas this one was Carlos Bonayem. A year before, a year after, they did not credit a perfumer, or maybe it's just not documented online. But great amber here. Really great. You know, I had many opportunities along the 2000s to buy a bottle of this. I kind of dismissed it because I kind of was dismissing Halston as a brand, because I thought that the Z-14 was, you know, watered down and not as good. But compared to this with the new 112, the watering down is even worse. So that's kind of why I never really dug into these fragrances, but they're really great. They've not been redone. I think what I'm buying, or what I bought, both of these are like, you know, the stock that they had when they first launched them, and I think solid releases, both of them. But this features notes of amber, myrrh, labdanum, oud, cedar, musk, thyme, geranium, bergamot. So in the end, it's a very ambery, resinous, balsamic experience with oud. Then there's a woodsy touches, the musk, and of course aromatic notes as well. Bergamot is not so prominent. It's very deep and rich, and I really love the way it smells. I wish I had a larger bottle. This is a 2.5 ounce, I believe, but I think it smells fantastic on me. It's a great creation, and definitely, if you can get your hands on a bottle, do, because I'm not sure how much they will have of these laying around once everyone buys it, obviously, and uses it up, if that makes sense. Halston Man Amber, a great scent. And then finally, Halston Woman Amber, for me, was not really working. I wasn't wearing this one. I was smelling it out of a bottle. But once I wore it, the fragrance just totally came alive, became really beautiful. Once again, I don't have a name for a perfumer here, just like the Man Amber, but this goes very aldehydic for me, and it adds that kind of lift and floaty, airy quality that I like in aldehydic fragrances. But in the end, it's an amber. So amber is heavy and weighty, right? Aldehydes contrast. It's very uplifting and airy kind of a thing. But loads of amber here. Olibanum, sandalwood, aldehydes, suede leather, musk, tuberose, rose, currants, mandarin orange. It's interesting, once the amber develops and then the olibanum comes in, it's got a smoky, incensey vibe. And then there's sandalwood. Interesting, both of these I get loads of sandalwood. I don't know if it's a trademark of the perfumes. Maybe this is created by Carlos Bonayem as well. But both of them are very sandalwoody, but of course this one's definitely a lot more ambery in comparison to this one, the silver for women. But gorgeous fragrance, really gorgeous. And once the fragrance is drying down, some fruitiness comes through as well. There is that fruity note in here, but solid. They're so different compositions. Definitely feminine amber, definitely masculine amber, but I think they can overlap. Both men and women can wear both of these. Just this one screams a little feminine, this one screams a little masculine. But there's ambers that are targeted unisex, so I think if you like the idea of both, wear both. But gorgeous fragrances. I can't believe I missed the boat on those, but thankfully I didn't. Now I have them. I'd like to find some of the other fragrances from Halston. I wore Catalyst at one time, the men's Catalyst in the mid-90s, and I really loved the bottles. Really enjoyed them. There's no way I can find that fragrance. Sadly, it's completely gone. But let me know if you know these fragrances I discussed today. Let me know of any other Halston fragrances that you've worn that you were a fan of. I'd like to find out what you know and don't know. And if you're a younger person, would you be curious to check out some of these classic fragrances from a house that doesn't really do anything anymore. I had to look up Halston as well, and I noticed that they're still making fashion. They are doing fashion, but their website doesn't have any fragrances. So no fragrances are listed. Hopefully maybe they'll bring it back now that there's this whole interest in the man behind the brand and so forth. We'll see. And hopefully they'll launch some new fragrances. Either way, guys, thanks so much for tuning in today. Let me know your thoughts on Halston fragrances. Let me know your thoughts on the Halston mini-series. If you have any Halston fragrances currently, if you've worn them in the past, put a comment down so I can find out. Either way, I appreciate you tuning in today to watch fragrance thoughts for fragrances that are older and way older. I'm glad you did tune in. If you have any questions or comments, as I said, please list below. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.